after the institution of the Articles of Confederation, our founding fathers realized that there were some major inadequacy within that first form of government. So they realized pretty quickly that we're going to have to make some major changes. So they called together what was called the Constitutional Convention. Now, they were initially sent there in order to simply change the articles. They were not supposed to do anything but change that particular document. So they meet in May of 1787 in Philadelphia, and it included 12 of the 13 states. The only one that didn't come was Rhode Island, but all of the rest of the states were there. Had 55 delegates, and they're going to put George Washington, who was going to preside over that meeting. They realized pretty quickly that there's really no reforming the articles. They decided they're going to simply rewrite that government. They're going to completely scrap the old one, and again, they're going to just rewrite it. That each state would get one vote, but they would have to keep this meeting a secret. They did not go there with permission to completely scrap and rewrite an entire form of government. So they had to keep this secret, very secretive. They also decided that a simple majority would rule in all decision making. So the major issues were, one, representation. How are we going to represent the states between large and small states? The issue of slavery, what were we going to do with it? And the various styles of economies that were already present in the states, because we had some major differences between the North and the South already. So the first issue at hand was representation. The Virginia Plan is going to be presented by James Madison, and it's going to call for 3 branches of government and a bicameral Congress. Now, bicameral means it's going to have 2 houses. This is going to be your large state plan, okay, because this is going to be calling for representation based on population. So again, you see why this is going to be your large state plan, because it was proportional. Your representation would be proportional to how many people lived in your state. The New Jersey plan, on the other hand, is your small state plan. Obviously, the size of New Jersey is much smaller than Virginia. It's going to call for equal voting as opposed to proportional voting. It also called for a group executive, as well as this one's going to be really important for states' rights. It's going to really emphasize the importance of states' rights. So again, whereas the Virginia plan called for proportional representation, this one's going to call for equal representation among the states. So we've got to come up with some compromises. The first one's called the Great Compromise, or the Connecticut Compromise. This one called for a house, what will later be called the House of Representatives. This is going to be based on how many people live in your state. This is proportional, or based on population. The Senate is going to be 2 votes per state, or 2 representatives per state. So every state gets 2 senators. The next is the 3/5 Compromise. The issue in the South was that in many southern states, there were just as many, or sometimes more, slaves who lived there than there were white citizens. So they wanted to be able to count slaves as a part of their population. Obviously, the North did not want to allow this because slaves had no rights in society, so why would they be counted as their population? But the South really pushed for this, and so here's what they come up with. They said that slaves would count as 3/5 of a person when it came for the census, so that way they do get to count some towards their representation, because that's how we know how many senators and not senators, but House members that we have in each state is based on your population from the census. So every 10 years when we do a census, your numbers might be adjusted based on how many citizens you have. So slaves are going to count as 3/5 of a person. The next compromise is a slave trade compromise. It said basically that Congress would not tax exports, which was going to be key because your North obviously is going to be your manufacturing and your trading, so that's going to benefit them. And they also said that the slave trade would not be banned right away, but it could be banned in 20 years, meaning the bringing in of slaves from Africa. So it could be. So they're going to kind of leave that open, because even at the Constitutional Convention, slavery is already a major issue. So this new government is going to solve a lot. It's going to be much stronger. Whereas the Articles had no power to tax, this government does have the power to tax and regulate trade. It also had a very strong executive that was balanced by a Congress and a judicial branch. Now, here was the trick. They needed 9 out of the 13 states to ratify this new Constitution. This was going to be tricky because remember, these representatives did not go there with the permission to completely scrap and rewrite a new government. So here's the tricky part. You had two basically factions. Now, your founding fathers would have never called them political parties. They did not like political parties. They thought they were too selfish and didn't really represent the people. But your Federalists are going to be those people who supported the passage of the new Constitution and who believed in a very strong central government. They thought this was going to be best for our new country. Your anti-Federalists are going to be those who did not like the new Constitution because they thought that not only would states' rights suffer, but they feared a central government that was too powerful. And they did not like that prospect at all. So what you're going to have both of these groups going back to the state trying to obviously get support for their position. The Federalist Papers are going to be written trying to support this new strong government, written by figures like Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, who all go on to have significant parts in our new government. But they really supported this new government, believed it was what was best. And again, they kind of wrote them. They didn't specifically write their names on each of these Federalist Papers, but we know this is who wrote them. These are going to circulate, again, trying to garner support for the new Constitution. Eventually, it is going to be ratified, but mostly because they promised there would be a Bill of Rights that would come later. So this Bill of Rights is going to be key in getting those anti-Federalists on board to support the new Constitution.